We all need to make smart decisions with our money. The Long-Term Investor Podcast shows you how by distilling complex financial matters into easily digestible lessons. And now, here's your host, Chief Investment Officer at PlanCorp and the author of Making Money Simple, Peter Lazaroff.
Welcome to another mailbag edition of the show, where I'm answering questions from readers and listeners. As a reminder, you can visit thelongterminvestor.com to submit questions. And if you're signed up for my newsletter, which I send out twice a month, then all you have to do is reply to one of those emails, and it goes straight to my inbox. I have more questions than I can possibly get to today, but I'll knock out a few here now, and how soon I do another one of these episodes will largely be determined by the feedback you give me. So please leave a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, and let me know if you want more of these episodes or not in the future. Now, let's dive in. First question. The biggest financial question that I have, and one that doesn't seem to get enough love in the world of the internet financial advice, potentially because it's either too personal or subjective, is how best should someone estimate their spending in retirement? I really liked your blog post on reverse budgeting, but it seems like the hardest part about reverse budgeting is figuring out the end goal. It seems like there are many somewhat concrete goals like purchasing a house, college savings account, etc., but the most nebulous number to pin down is how much you'll really need to spend in retirement, which particularly for younger folks is difficult to determine. Do you have any advice for estimating that dollar amount? Thanks for the question. I'll be sure to link to the reverse budgeting post that this reader is referencing in the show notes, just in case anybody's curious. And you can also access a lot of the pertinent information about reverse budgeting in the goal planning worksheet, which again, you can always find on my site, but I'll link to it in the show notes. In my experience, I've always found that the best predictor of future spending is current spending, maybe with an inflation adjustment. I mean, you can come up with all sorts of expenses that you view as one time in your working years and other expenses that you wouldn't expect to have in retirement. Education is a pretty common one that comes to mind. But in my experience, most people tend to redirect spending to different categories rather than spend less. And this isn't 100% true, but it's true more often than you'd think. Plus, it's better to be conservative by overestimating your future spending than by underestimating it. Now, the closer you get to retirement, obviously the more accurate of a predictor current spending will be for retirement spending. And if you're younger and you haven't reached what you think is going to be your peak earning years, well, then you might have to get a little more creative. By peak earning years, I mean the period where your salary is maybe still going up by a few percentage points each year, but you aren't expecting any sort of double-digit percentage increases any longer. Most data would say that this comes at some point in your mid-40s or 50s, but it's obviously going to vary from person to person. So one thing a person in their 20s or 30s might do is predict the age and income at which you think a general earnings peak might happen, and then inflate that salary by 2 to 3% until the age you would retire. And from that number, you'll want to back out taxes, so you can just take a percentage of whatever you think taxes might be, and you'll want to back out planned savings, like contributions you'd be making to a 401k or brokerage savings, because that typically gives you a more accurate picture of what you'll be spending then. And of course, anything you model out is going to be wrong, but that's not really the point of the exercise. This part of the financial planning process isn't about being precise. It's really about pointing your compass in the right direction. And if you think about that compass and you think about pointing it in a direction and walking for decades, changing your path by just a few degrees is going to put you in a very different final destination. You mostly just don't want to be way off course. I mean, even being 30 degrees off course is dramatic over multiple decades, but you're undoubtedly going to be a few degrees off, so you plan to make adjustments over time. Because financial planning isn't a one-time exercise, it's something that should be regularly reviewed and updated to incorporate the many changes you experience in life. Obviously, working with an advisor can help you do a little more complex modeling on your future spending, but hopefully this gives you a good bit of insight on how to get started. Okay, next question. I'm a widow at age 45 and have just under $500,000 across IRAs, 403bs, and 401ks. It's been suggested by one financial advisor that because they expect that to double every 7 to 10 years, that I no longer need to save for retirement. That sounds a little iffy to me. A little more potentially relevant information, I'll have combined pension income from my late husband and myself of about $1,300 per month, and I'll also be eligible for Social Security. I'm currently investing 17% of my income into a 403b. Thanks. This is an interesting question. So the rule of 72 would suggest that a portfolio earning 8% a year would double every 9 years. So the idea that the money might double every 7 to 10 years may not be terribly far off base, but not saving for retirement at your age does seem a bit iffy at first glance. Perhaps that's true if your spending is so low that the projected growth of your existing portfolio dwarfs whatever you can imagine spending beyond your pension income in retirement. And if that's true, and you can easily support your spending to, say, age 95 or 100, then I guess the need for retirement savings is reduced. But it also matters what the other option for your additional cash flow would be. If this person's trying to encourage you to buy a financial product like insurance or an annuity so that they can earn a commission, well, I'd say that's not as good of a use of extra capital. Again, not knowing all the information, but generally speaking. But let's say you wanted to pay down your mortgage more quickly so that you would ensure you're debt-free heading into retirement. Well, that might have more merit. Or maybe you don't have any sort of emergency savings to fall back on. So perhaps redirecting retirement savings to an emergency fund could make sense. And again, this all depends a bit on the various nuances in your life. But the idea of stopping all investment savings at age 45, whether it's for retirement or other goals, sounds a bit questionable given the little context that you've provided. You might still benefit from investing, but perhaps you ought to look at investing in taxable accounts to better manage the tax liability you're going to have in retirement from your pensions and your required minimum distributions from your retirement accounts. I mean, it's hard to know for sure, but those are the sort of things I'd be looking into with a new client in this situation. It's really a capital allocation question. What is the best place to put your extra cash flow? It may even be that some of that extra cash flow should be spent. And if you're living frugally and can afford a bit of lifestyle expansion, that's a great alternative to saving more for retirement if the numbers work out. Moving right along to the next question, this person writes in to say, I'm 66 and my husband and I really need our Social Security as we're pretty much without income as of this month. We have approximately $1.5 million in 401ks. We've never done any Roth conversions. And my husband will start taking his Social Security at age 66. We're invested in stock funds that produce income. It's a 60% stock, 40% bond allocation. And the combined Social Security before insurance is taken out is $5,000 per month. And we're taking $3,000 from investments per month. Got any advice to offer on that snapshot? Well, my first instinct is to look into tapping the retirement accounts to cover cash flow in the near term instead of tapping Social Security. Because every year you delay Social Security, the payment that you receive goes up 8%. And that's a pretty great return. Now, could your 60-40 portfolio earn 8% a year? Sure, it could. But it's far less of a certainty than the Social Security payment rising by 8% a year. As a rule of thumb, you should wait to tap Social Security until you get to the maximum payment at age 70. And in terms of the total dollars you would receive from Social Security if you took it early versus full retirement age versus age 70 is really dependent on how long you live. The break-even point for taking Social Security across all those strategies is age 84. So if you think you're going to live beyond age 84, you're going to end up with the most lifetime dollars by delaying Social Security to age 70. The other thing that sticks out to me about your situation is that even though you haven't ever done a Roth conversion, this actually might be the absolute perfect time to do so. Because once you start taking Social Security, your taxable income is going to be higher, which makes the cost of a partial Roth conversion higher. And while I don't have all the information, delaying Social Security and doing some partial Roth conversions could save you quite a bit on taxes over the course of your lifetime. Now, for compliance purposes, I want to make it clear, I'm about to just throw out a guess here, but I would think you're talking tens of thousands of dollars in lifetime tax savings. Okay, next question. My wife and I moved into a bigger home 3 years ago and financed using a jumbo 30-year fixed rate mortgage. While everyone else was refinancing the past year or two, we found that rates weren't as attractive for jumbo loan refinancing. But now I'm seeing the amount that qualifies for a regular non-jumbo loan is going up to the point where we would qualify. With normal loans now covering a larger dollar amount, is there any reason someone with a jumbo loan wouldn't refinance? Good question. So the quote normal loan this person is referring to is a conforming loan. And it used to be, well, actually it currently still is in 2021, that conforming loans were loans of $548,250 or less. But beginning in 2022, that amount will be $625,000. So as of this recording, you still have to wait a little longer for loans of that amount to fall into the conforming loan definition. To answer the question, though, more directly, there's really nothing wrong with being in a jumbo loan, so you wouldn't want to refinance just to be in a conforming loan. Whether it really makes sense depends on the specific terms of your refinancing. Obviously, you'd want the loan to have a lower interest rate so that you're realizing some savings from the transaction, but there's also cost to consider with refinancing, which is fine. But the rule of thumb that we use at PlanCorp is to make sure that it takes no more than 2 years for the monthly mortgage payment savings to cover those costs. And figuring this out is pretty simple. You just start by subtracting your expected monthly payment from what you currently pay. So this is what you would save per month. Next, you'd add up the total costs of the fees associated with the refinancing, and then you divide that total amount by the monthly savings. The result tells you how many months you need to stay in your house to make up the cost of the refinancing. So if, for example, your break-even number is 18, it will take you 18 months to recoup the refinancing costs and actually start realizing the benefit of the mortgage payment savings. And again, our rule of thumb is that it should take no more than 2 years for you to break even on a refinancing. One final thing that's less of a consideration for you, but might be for someone else listening, how far you are into your current mortgage can change the math behind the choice to refinance. For example, if you're more than 10 years into a 30-year mortgage, then resetting the term by refinancing into another 30-year mortgage might actually increase the interest you will pay over the lifetime of owning the home. And I just said there's one last thing, but now really, truly, one last thing to consider is that prior to refinancing, you might want to call the bank servicing your mortgage and tell them that you're going to finance, but ask if they want to lower your interest rate instead. And sometimes they'll change the rate on your loan without even resetting the term. Now, I want to be clear, I've never seen this happen firsthand, but I've spoken to people who insist it happens occasionally. But what I have seen happen is the bank sometimes responds to this request by essentially refinancing the loan at market rates, but with far less cost and hassle than a traditional refinancing. Okay, last question. This is the first year that I've had access to an HSA, but I'm not entirely sure how or where to invest the funds. You seem to be pretty bullish on these accounts, so I was hoping you could point me in the right direction. Thanks for the question. Just as a quick refresher for everyone, an HSA stands for Health Savings Account. And in order to have access to an HSA, you must be in a high deductible plan, and that isn't necessarily for everyone. Oftentimes, when you have the option of a high deductible plan, you also have the option of a PPO. And my general rule of thumb is that you choose the high deductible plan if your expected medical expenses are going to be less than the sum of your savings and premiums, your employer contributions, and the PPO deductible. Otherwise, you would choose the PPO plan. Also, while investing HSA dollars isn't a strategy for everyone, it is a valuable retirement savings tool for high earners because they earn a triple tax benefit. There's a tax deduction on the contribution, there's tax-deferred growth when you're investing, and then there's tax-free withdrawal for qualifying medical expenses. And I'll be sure to link to an article on HSAs in the show notes if you want to learn more about them. But to answer the question at hand, if you're going to invest your HSA like a retirement account, you should be looking for providers that don't have maintenance fees or additional one-off fees. You want someone who's going to offer reasonable interest and FDIC insurance on deposits. You want high quality and inexpensive options in core asset classes when you're looking to invest. Certainly you want low investment fees, and nobody does this for free to my knowledge, but you don't want to pay more than you need to. And finally, I would say that you don't want to be required to keep money in a spending account before investing, particularly if your goal here is to invest the account like a retirement account. Now, if you really want to geek out, Morningstar does an annual report on HSA providers that I'll link to in the show notes. And for what it's worth, Fidelity and Lively get the top 2 rankings from Morningstar out of 11 different offerings. I myself use Lively, and I like it. I've only used one other option, and that was Optum, and I didn't like it. So that's kind of why I'm at Lively now. From an investing perspective, with Lively, your assets get custodied at TD Ameritrade. So investing on Lively is basically like having a TD Ameritrade account where you can invest in whatever you want. Because Charles Schwab bought TD Ameritrade, though, I don't know how that's going to impact Lively going forward. But for now, I really like Lively's HSA functionality and user interface. But again, Morningstar has Fidelity as the top one and Lively as the second. And so maybe you go give those a check out. Maybe you download the report. And I hope that little direction gives you the help you're looking for. If I didn't answer your question today, I will be sure to address it in another mailbag episode or just shoot you a quick response via email. Again, let me know in the comments if you want me to keep doing these episodes. I will absolutely keep doing them. And as always, you can visit thelongterminvestor.com to shoot me questions or sign up for my newsletter. A lot of people reply directly to my newsletter with questions and general comments, which I really love, so keep them coming. Until next time, to long-term investing.
Thanks for listening to the Long-Term Investor Podcast. To access free financial resources and submit questions to be answered on the show, visit thelongterminvestor.com. Peter Lazaroff is an employee of PlanCorp and BrightPlan. All opinions expressed by Peter and any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of PlanCorp or BrightPlan. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of PlanCorp and BrightPlan may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.